Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends. My name is David Waralu. My sincere apologies for the delay. I got some technical issues I had to deal with. It's resolved. We are online here. So excited to be here with you guys. Uh, First of all, let me tell you something about the earthquake that's taking place in Ukraine. My heart goes out in Turkey rather and Syria. It's so sad. It's very sad to see what is going on in Turkey with the earthquake. So my heart goes out to those individuals. It's over 20,000 people die, and this is where the part where you say to yourself, uh, how short life is. Here's these people living in their part of the world. Only a week ago, things were fine. Earthquake happens so quick, turn things upside down for them. And yet for us, we are so entangled into spending our energy in creating conflicts, creating tensions with people instead of living in a peaceful existence so everybody can live in peace. That's the sad part that I found and I don't have words to express this one, because what word would you express? What word would you use when such a natural disaster like that befall people? Doesn't matter what part of the world, they are human beings. So our heart goes out to those individuals. So before I'll delve deeper into all this, please let me know what part of the world you are joining me from here. I always like to know. Let me take a look, see here. Albach from Canada, good to have you here. Jack Robert, good to see you as always from UK. Jack, I always truly appreciate your feedback, your comments, your contribution to the conversation. It means a lot. So, who else is from? Let me just see here quickly before I'll dive into Toronto. Tak Dwen from Toronto, good to see you as always. Who else? London. Philippines, Charito, good to see you. So it's very excited to see people from different parts of the world, because we are all here to learn from each other. I'm here to learn from you as much as you are to learn from me. So it goes both ways. Unlike some idiots that sometimes they put certain comments like, for example, this channel is propaganda for China. How stupid one can get. So I will advise these individuals to please and subscribe from this channel, because we don't lower the standards here. So you can take that nonsense to somewhere else. So, and I guess you guys know this about me by now, I don't hold back and I don't tolerate nonsense, because it's nonsense, and I have no tolerance for stupidity. Anyway, that's let's move on with what is very important. So what I'm gonna do, guys, is I'm gonna talk to you about, of course, the sabotage that is now the news, that the US was involved. And again, I'm not reporting the news here. That's not what I do. I'm gonna just highlight some key aspects that I need you to know, and highlight to you also the importance of why this is very, very important to understand when it comes to when a power is in a declining trajectory. Usually what happens when an empire or a power, whatever you want to call it, when it's in decline, one of the signs, beside the social corruption, the moral corruption, the internal dysfunction, and so forth, it's the foreign policy. That declining power will start to embark on policies that make no sense whatsoever. And this is one of the examples for the sabotage. And that's what I'm going to be detailing for you moving forward. But before I'll dive deeper, also, I need to let you know that I am thankful for your support. And please, if this is your first time landing on this channel, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification button, so you will be notified every time I upload a new video. So let's talk briefly about who Seymour Hersh is. He's somebody who's been around for, you're looking at about 50 years. So it's somebody I was familiar with when I was in Washington, and I knew, of course, of him before I got to Washington, and somebody with credibility. Even the government dared to question his credibility. His sources are inside the government. And we need to have people like that. And the reason being because that's how you hold the government accountable. Because if you don't, the government ends up doing whatever, which is exactly what we are witnessing right now. You look at just how our government here, and I don't shy away to those who say, well, you criticize the government. No. It's the care that I have for the country that prompts me to talk. And you need to say the truth to the government so people can understand. If I didn't care, I wouldn't even be here on the air. It's simple as that. I got plenty of things to do. I got things to write. So that's a weak argument to begin with. So that's why if somebody like Seymour Hersh is worth reading his articles, is worth following, is worth learning from. 50 years of experience is no small matter. So briefly, he's an investigative journalist, of course, and he gained some sort of recognition back in 1969. That's how far back he goes. And the reason why? Because he exposed the Malay massacre and the cover-up during the Vietnam War. Yes, he was Seymour Hersh. And I'm not here going to be talking about his Pulitzer Prize winning and all that. All that stuff is great, but I got to focus on what is important for you to know. During the 1970s, Seymour Hersh was the one that covered for the New York Times the Watergate. So it's somebody very, very familiar with how the system works. In 2004, of course, after the invasion of Iraq, it was Seymour Hersh that disclosed and exposed the U.S. military mistreatments of detainees in Abu Ghraib prison, which was a disgrace to our country. Straightforward. It saddens me to say this, but we have reached a lower level, a moral decadence, for us to start behave the way we've been behaving, and we are behaving, enemy or not, he or she is a human being before anything else. I was in Afghanistan and I saw what the Australians did to some Afghanis. You don't stand and pee over a dead body. That's disgrace. That's inhumane. And you claim a moral authority? You're saying we are defender of human rights when you couldn't treat somebody humanely. I understand the argument. Oh, there's the enemy and so forth. Yes, they are or they may be, but beside the point. And that's what Seymour Hersh had the courage. That's why I say the government cannot discredit somebody like him. And we need more of him. Why? Because that's the responsibility of citizens to hold the government accountable. But you got a mass population here in the US, and I speak for my country here. I can't speak for others. That is so distracted. You look at just right now, everybody is in the heights of this football thing that's coming up on tomorrow or whatever. How sad. I'm not against football. You go enjoy football. But at the same time, what you don't realize is that that's one of the distraction, a mechanism by which the government got to keep you occupied so you won't start to ask questions that matter. Human nature, what will become of human nature? And if you ask how many wars were there during last century, how many died last century? During war, during political oppressions. Did we even learn anything from empathy, sympathy, or even what you may call God, however you perceive God to be? And you think about it just for a simple term. If we are to sort of just alter our brain chemistry, with some ingredients of empathy or sympathy, how will we react to each other? And this is what's missing, the big picture. That's what Seymour Hersh does. And I truly admire and respect his work. And he's not after fame. I can tell you this for a fact. So, All right, let's delve into this sabotage now. I'm gonna just brief talk about some aspects of it. Then I'll talk about the big picture, and the big picture is the decline of America because it is declining. I will say it straightforward. So let me share one particular picture with you because I want you to see what are we gonna talking about right here. That's the pipeline that was blow up. And I'm gonna explain to you a few things based again on what Seymour Hersh has disclosed. And by the way, this plan, this sabotage, didn't happen a week before. It happened back towards late 2021. As a matter of fact, this goes back even further than that. But it wasn't in this context. It was in another context. And I remember talking about this when the United States threatened Germany with sanctions. Why? Because Germany approved the Nord Stream 2 at that time. And in the back of my mind, I was like, isn't Germany an ally of the US? Why would the US sanction an ally? Of course, I knew the background story, and I am not surprised that Germany has no sovereignty either. When you look at, in comparison to Canada and Australia, and New Zealand to a degree, Philippines, I'm starting to put question marks about Philippines. You start to wonder, do they have any sovereignty? That's how far back it goes. But for this particular event, for the pipeline, the Nord Stream, that is, the planning started to take place towards the late 21, the beginning of 2022. So the momentum gained speed at that time. So meaning that the decision was made to come up with a covert plan, covert sabotage attack to do that. And who was sort of assigned to this? Two entities, CIA and the US Navy. State Department was to a degree. And this working group that works this plan refer back to, usually reports, rather not refer back, but reports to none other than Jake Sullivan. Sullivan is the National Security Advisor, which he goes way back in his relationship to the president. That's how he got the possession. Usually the problem for us in America is you got people at the high offices with no credentials, with no qualifications, just because so-called loyalty. Jake Sullivan, no different than Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, they used to work for Biden when he was vice president way back. So as a reward, you give them possessions like National Security Advisor, like State Department, when they have no clue about how geopolitics is, what geopolitics is all about, and the intricacies of understanding how to handle and manage relations with other countries. There were, by the way, some individuals inside the CIA and State Department that tried, and I'll give them credit, they tried to push back against this because they knew that it will be a suicide. They argued, and based on what Seymour Hersh report says, and I put this in quote, don't do this. That's the argument. It's stupid. It will be a political nightmare if it comes out. Well, of course, the truth always comes out. That is the problem with what we have in our system. Nonetheless, in early 2022, so the decision was made to move forward with this. And here is what's interesting. Back in February 10th, 7th or 10th or something like that, the first week of February, because remember, the incursion of Russia into Ukraine started on February 24th. So on the February 7th, as I said, the decision was made. But at that time, who was in the White House? It was none other than Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, and after some wobbling, because German chancellor, he's weak politically. The guy is so weak. He is not qualified to handle the chancellery. You compare him to Angela Merkel. Let's just state the fact. You compare him to Helmut Schmidt. You compare him to Helmut Kohl. You compare him to Gerhard Schröder. There is no comparison. Yes, you might think about those guys are not, Yeah, beside the point. They really thought about what is pragmatic. This guy, Olaf Scholz, when he was in the White House on February 7th, couldn't say no to the president. It's no different than what we are witnessing right now with the Prime Minister of Netherlands. Right. Couldn't say no to the U.S. because the U.S. is pressuring Germany not to allow ASML company to send the microchip equipments to China and so forth. Makes you just wonder. This is again goes back to my point about the deficiency in Western leadership. There's none. So Olaf Scholz couldn't say anything. But at the same time, what is very concerning about this is the statement that was by the President Biden, during the press release between the two. And what President Biden said, and let me get the quote here because I want to make sure I quoted word for word. If Russia invade, there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. End of quote. It's disturbing. It's very disturbing. Why is disturbing? It's disturbing for the fact that we claim the moral high ground of decency, of human rights, of a rule of law, and yet we go and do the opposite. What does it make us? I know in international relations, there are those who will say, well, in international relations, it's all about strategic interest. I agree. But also it is about credibility as well. What makes you think that now, after this, what just emerged, which, by the way, the Biden administration was trying to say, oh, no, there is no truth into this. That's usually the tactic of denial, So what makes you think now that any country in the world, except the weak allies like Germany, like Australia, like Canada, like New Zealand, like Japan, like South Korea, maybe Philippines to a degree, we will want to trust the United States? This is what saddens me the most. Personally, I don't speak on behalf of government. I care less because I know how corrupted the system is as an American. And I am sure you do understand, like in your country, whatever part of the world, it's not you that is involved in the policy, it's the government. It's no different for us here. But it pains me as an American. That's what prompts me to come on the air. Because something has to be said. Well, there are those who will say, well, aren't you afraid? Afraid of what? There is one life to be lived. And you shouldn't be fearing humans. What is the worst that can happen? Because at least you stood for something that matters. It's because that's why we always say leadership is great and leader this, leader that. But when it matters, that's where that leadership is tested. No different than what this happens about this particular incident of the sabotage. European leaders are so damn weak. They couldn't take a stand. Because that's when it matters. So what's the point? If I am to be a leader just in a good time, what's the point? If my leadership cannot be tested when it matters. And this is exactly an example of it. So, but here is the big picture that I need you to understand. Why Olaf Scholz was so weak to say no to the US, and also why the United States was pushing hard, even against those individuals who were inside the CIA and State Department that said, don't do it. It's not pragmatic. It's political suicide. And it turns out they were right, Here is what Seymour Hersh wrote in the article. By the way, and I'll put a link for you guys. The full article is on Substack. Here is what's interesting. Here is where the corruption and the hypocrisy of our media. No media, no Western media, established one, wanted to take the story first. It was till Seymour Hersh exposed. All of a sudden, they're running these media outlets, running to cover the story, to show that they want to be on the right side of history, which is a lie anyway. Makes you beg the question, how can you trust them? Should you trust them? If you want my opinion, I will say no. I don't. But again, you are independent. You are an individual. You have enough intellectual capabilities to decide for yourself and differentiate between this and that, between what is fiction and the truth. This is what this channel is all about. Here is what Seymour Hersh wrote, and I quote, "As long as Europe remained dependent on the pipelines for cheap natural gas, Washington was afraid that countries like Germany will be reluctant to supply Ukraine with the money and weapons it needed to defeat Russia." End of quote. How delusional that is. You know, what makes us think we're going to defeat the Russians? That's an illusion. And this is why you have voices like Scott Ritter. You got voices like Professor Sachs. You got, Jack Martin in England. You know, the individuals that speaks pragmatism. And yet some noises, some voices of hypocrisy pushing back against that. Professor Mersheimer, just common sense. But here is the kicker for me personally. Here is where the big problem is. Excuse me. The big problem is, in this plan that was hatched out back then, it was another country in the backdrop. That country was aware of what's going to be happening. As a matter of fact, it took part of the plot, the sabotage. And that country is none other than Norway. Yeah, that's why Scandinavians are becoming, Scandinavian countries, and not the people, by the way, I'm talking about governments. They're becoming corrupted. I went to Helsinki. I've been in Helsinki. I've been in Stockholm. I've been in Copenhagen. Nice places, wonderful people, very easygoing, laid back. It's not they don't care, they just want to live in peace, and they were living in peace. And now you look at their governments, as corrupted as they become. You look at with the Prime Minister Sanna in Finland, a graduate of the World Economic Forum. What do you expect? That's why the Finnish economy is sinking. And I did a video on it, guys. You might want to check that out if you have not done so. Sweden, why all of a sudden you want to join NATO? Well, it wasn't Sweden. It was pushed behind the scenes. And I'll tell you why as I move forward here. So Norway, in the case of the sabotage, played a significant logistical role and an intelligent role as well, because it assisted the U.S. elite Navy deep divers. Yeah. So that's how it works. And the deep divers, that is, the base, it's not classified again. Of course, I can't disclose classified stuff, but it's located in Florida, and that's all I can say here. That's where the training camp and so forth. So the idea is that, why is this important? And it is important for you to understand, because who is the Secretary of NATO? John Stoltenberg. Where is Stoltenberg is from? He's from Norway. He's the former Prime Minister of Norway, and he was the former Norwegian representative to the UN. So you can just see why Stoltenberg is pushing now for the increase of NATO presence in the Nordic states. So, like I always say, always think of the big picture. Things don't happen in a vacuum. Don't happen in a vacuum. So that is the reason why you are noticing now Stoltenberg went to Asia, went to Japan and South Korea to foment more tensions in that part of the world. So Norway's involvement, Danish to a degree. There are some, I did find out elsewhere that the Danish, there's some light involvement, shall we say, and I'll put it lightly here. But the main one was Norway. Norway was involved into all this. So fast forward, after the February 7th meeting in the White House between the President Biden, and Olaf Scholz, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, in March, the team that was supposed to conduct the op went to Norway. So, and the key question was about where exactly it's going to target the pipeline. I'm going to show you a map as to where that is right there. If you follow with me here, so Norway is around here somewhere. So you got the pipeline. This is the Nord Stream. Actually, both pipelines here. There's only 1 mile between the two. So, and the question was, well, where are we going to target it? Well, of course, it has to be on the Baltic Sea. And it was targeted right in this area here. That is exactly what it was targeted. So that's what happened with the Norwegian team. So because Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, two sets of pipelines. And as I said again, there is only one particular distance, which is a mile wide. And all of them, usually these pipelines, will end up in an area called, not end up, but it runs to the port of, it's called a grain, I can't pronounce this German, Greifswald. Let me show you where that port is. Not this one here. Right there. This is where the port is. So you can just see why the United States had to do what it had to do to prevent. Because here is the truth. Beside all this, the truth why we don't want Germany to get closer to Russia. We don't want the whole Europe to get closer to Russia. Because if they do, European economy will become stronger. Because energy plays a major role in economic prosperity. You can look at just history. And look at us after World War II. And if you weren't for oil in World War II, Japan would have won the war. But Japan didn't have access to oil with it because we got a deal with the Saudis. So that is why. So we decided to go about it this way. So this brings me to the idea of the collapse of the United States. So it really pains me to be talking about this because it's my country. You know, and again, I care less for the government. I care less for the government. But when you start to think in terms of what your country is doing, being on the wrong side of history, you start to say to yourself, this cannot be. It shouldn't be. So for the US, this role that we've been founded on, you know, I teach government. So when you think about the beginning of America, what it was founded on. So claiming the moral authority, yeah, which is often have been associated with the idea of how exceptional the US is. Well, I'm going to use the past tense, how exceptional the US was, because the US is no exception anymore. It's not exceptional anymore. After this, we hit the rock bottom. Moral decadence, bankruptcy, because that's what it is. So when we claim that this exceptionalism that we are, no, the world doesn't see it that way. Yes, there are some who have accepted that, but there are also those who rejected that in varying degrees. You can think about it anyway. because that's the truth. That's the reality. So when we say U.S. exceptionalism, the claim to be the model of democracy, the model of human rights, the model of upholding the law. And now you say this, it increasingly rang hollow to many around the world. This is why I said earlier, how many countries do you think is going to now trust the United States? What do we say? We can't. We just can't. Credibility matters. Truth matters. And this is why successive American administrations have violated the very values that they have so often proclaimed. Like I always say, we claim human rights, we claim protection for rule of law, we claim supporting people and all that, and yet we commit the atrocities behind the scenes. Why would we go and blow up a pipeline to prevent a country like Germany from importing oil or gas from Russia? It's not the US only to blame. Let's be fair here. The Germans are also to blame because they are so weak. They couldn't take a stand. So it's like in a relationship, if there is an abuser, okay, what would you do? Are you going to stand up to that abuser? Or are you going to stay quiet and take the abuse? It becomes on you as much as it is on the abuser. It's no different here. So the question becomes, does it matter? Should we care? Yes, it does. As an American, it concerns me a great deal, even though I feel comfortable saying it's too late. We have abused our power. Like the saying, with power comes a responsibility. That is true. When I was in the military, in charge of the unit, you lead by example. I would never ever tell a soldier to do something if I couldn't do it, or if I don't do it myself first. How can you lead without having an example for it? And usually that is what's happening now for us. It's been happening for the last 30 years, especially in my area when it comes down to geopolitics and foreign policy. We never had a strategy in foreign policy. We never had any ideas of how to construct a well-founded policy that benefits both us and the other party. That concept of win-win. So that's why it does matter. And that's what prompted me to come in here and talk. And it is only a concern for those Americans who, for example, it will be like the late Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State, The one who said, and I quote here, sees the US as, and I quote, the indispensable nation of special people who stand tall and see further than other countries into the future, end of quote. Wait a minute. Yet the late Secretary of State, who once publicly admitted that she thinks that the death of 500,000 Iraqi children, it's worth it. How insane, how inhumane one can get. George W. Bush, unauthorized invasion of Iraq. The failure of our financial system industry, which led to the global financial crisis in 2009, which has threatened the viability, not only of the US economy, but the global economy, or the global system for that matter. Mr. Obama's fascination with drones. So, what are we talking about? American exceptionalism? And when the US has said it has the claim, it has the right to seek out and murder anyone in the world, even if it that person happens to be an American citizen? Well, that's raising serious questions. Because the logical question to ask is, who gave the United States government the authority to make life or death decisions for a citizen of any country? If we are to say we pursue international law, then pursue the law avenue. That's like for us here in the US. We have so-called Supreme Court. Even Supreme Court is fractured. But can you imagine if we didn't have a Supreme Court, how are we going to be resolved major social issues? Through the guns? That's not right. You're talking about a civil war here. We can't have that. So. Or even you think about the idea of why, what's his name, the former CIA analyst and NSA, Edward Snowden. The revelation about the U.S. spying program called PRISM, P-R-I-S-M, the NSA spying program, which basically was spying on allies and adversaries alike, including U.S. citizens. Because this, in my opinion, what I just shared with you, it presents the damning evidence how American moral collapse is here, or has been. So this is what prompted me to talk about this one here, because you can't, in the case of the NSA and whether you are a German or French or South African or Chinese or Japanese or Russian or American, because that program, the PRISM one, enabled enable NSA access to your bank accounts, your health record, and every electronic device you have access to, especially for us Americans, when it says, in the Constitution, the government shall not infringe upon citizens' rights or citizens' privacy. Or privacy from what? From infringements by the government. But the majority do not even understand the content of the Constitution to begin with. So this is why the state of America today, so it really has distanced itself from its founding meaning and purpose and everything else, what we stood for. Most Americans have become numb, as they can only watch, their lives changing in front of their eyes and just watching, numb to the point, as I said, as they watch their lives change, liberty challenged, and the pursuit of happiness becomes even harder to obtain. Ask an average Jane and average Joe whether he or she has dinner tonight or not. And I'll tell you, I don't know if I will have dinner tonight or not. And yet, because what it was back then, it was that our nation, the US, was built on the idea of giving power to the people. Not anymore. Today, it has been eroded, to only benefit, the lobbyists, the interest groups, the elected officials, and so forth. This is the sad part, because you think about it in terms of I'll give you just quick example. Term limits in Congress. There's none, right? That's what most will say, because they don't know. They don't know that in Article 5, there is a clause there in the Constitution that does allow for an alternative. If there are 2/3 of the states within the Union sign the petition and send it to Congress, for a constitutional convention to be convened to allow term limit, Congress cannot turn that down. It will have to have a vote on the floor for it. But you ask, how many Americans know even that exists? So when you get ill-informed population, government end up doing whatever. This is part of where our problem is. And by the way, this was tried once in 1995. Sadly, as I said earlier, the Supreme Court is fractured. So the Supreme Court, in a majority 5-4, tossed these particular measures out. In other words, they didn't want it. That just shows you. And this is our big problem. And that's what I want to talk about. It's not about the, yes, it is about the pipeline. Yes, it is about understanding all the, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. So on the idea of just adding, it becomes problematic. It really becomes problematic. I have been seeing, I'll share this with you guys. I have been noticing the changes in America at least start to really, really resonate with me back in 1992. I'm gonna start to see. And I said, I don't know where America is going to be in the next 25 years. And here it is. So that is part of the big, big problem. And this is why nowadays, most countries are going to be paying attention. I am sure they will. You look at just like what I talked about for the in the video about the Secretary of Treasury trip to Africa. Oh, what made her think that Africa is going to trust the Americans, whatever they say? What makes now Asia, except for Japan and South Korea and Philippines to a degree? I am very concerned about Philippines. I'm concerned because is Marcos Jr. Bong Bong, they call him Bong Bong. By the way, thanks to the viewer from Philippines who explained to me that Bong Bong, it was just a slang. Basically, it has no meaning. I thought it has something culturally speaking, but so. To go ahead and establish and forge expansion of 5 other military bases. Why is Philippines putting itself putting a target on its back? I can understand with Japan, spineless. I can understand with South Korea. So, and this is why when an American president speaks on foreign policy, what the world ends up hearing, they end up only hearing chest beating bravado, basically, meaningless rhetoric about human rights and hollow claims of global greatness. Because this information about the sabotage now emerged highlight the hypocrisy of this. Because truly, the American system, our only enduring value these days is nothing but greed and power that wants to order all people around the world to abandon their way of life. Okay, and get this, guys, and prove themselves according to Washington, specifically ordained, self-serving, and coffer padding dictates. That's the sad part. And that is what most, let me say thank you here to JF. Thank you very much for your super sticker. I appreciate it. Your support, guys, mean a lot to me. I just want you to know this, and I don't take things for granted. I'm very grateful for your support. This is why I was always saying, I'm hoping, I don't talk about, cats playing, dogs running, and all that. That's why I'm not worried about 1 million views on a video, whatever. I care less for that. What I care about is when you click off, is you are left with more questions than when you came in. That's my objective. So thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it. So that is basically where the problem is. And that is why I wanted to come on the air and talk to you about this. Because now, and again, I'm a student of history. I look at just past uh, events, historical events from way back, from during the Turk Empire, the Dutch, the Spaniard, the Portuguese, the French, the British, and now the US. It's just the idea of, and I always give an example with the Roman Empire. Why did the Roman Empire disintegrate? Was it from a foreign invasion? No, it wasn't. It was because the moral corruption within its society. The representatives in the Senate start to think about their interests rather than the constituents. You can just see, at least if you happen to be an American watching here, or a Canadian for that matter, or an Australian. Other countries, at least, there are different systems and so forth. But I am sure it's not different. Yeah, I always look at it like, for example, in the case of Africa. Why Africa is so poor? Is Africa was by design had to be poor because the major powers do not want it to rise, and yet Africa has the resources, has the natural resources, has the manpower, and has the geographical advantages. But it is corruption that exists in countries. I don't shy away from saying it. Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, what would you get involved in a corruption when you want to improve your country? Nigeria with all the oil production, Cameroon, Senegal, Egypt, you name it. But can you just imagine if they can get their head together, where that country is going to be, where that continent rather is going to be? So, and this is the example, and this is why, whoever was advising the president, just to go back to our point about this sabotage, whoever was advising the president had no understanding of really what geopolitics is all about. Because if they thought, because the thinking, and I bet you this, I was on the other side, so I understand how the system works. So the thinking was short term. Anytime you think short term, it never ends up well. And also, I would say, shame on Europeans. Now, what you're going to be reading, and mark my word on it, what you're going to be reading now is that country is going to be launching their own investigation. It's sad. It's sad. So we, at least for us in the US, we need to refrain from mentioning the word human rights, rule of law. Really, we should refrain from that till we get our act together here at home first. And once again, I find it, I don't have words for it. I really don't. Why Americans are so oblivious to what's going on. It's like, again, in the Constitution. It is mentioned in the Constitution that the citizens have the right to know about the spending of the government. And how many wonder? They don't care because they are too preoccupied. Like I said, I walk around and everybody's sort of, their brain is kind of been manipulated in a way that go with what's going on with the trend. What the trend is football. Like I always tell my students, and I do tell my students, and I ask them a question. What's the season of sport we are in? They said, well, we are in football, Dr. O. Okay. And I said, what's after football? They said, baseball. And I said, what's after baseball? I'm sorry. I said, what's after football? They say, basketball. And I said, what's after basketball? They said, baseball. And I said, what's after baseball? They said, football. And I said, do you guys get it? At first, they are lost. They don't get it. I said, it's the cycle to keep you inside. You never get out of the cycle. That's the same thing. Most Americans are clueless, and I'll say it. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And the reason why I'm doing this, I just want to do my share, and I want to do my part. because at least when I go to sleep, I did what I could based on the resources I have and my abilities. I am not in possession of Secretary of State. I am not, I don't want to get involved there anyway, because they're not going to let me do what's need to be done to amend relations with the rest of the world. If it were up to me for 1 month to be Secretary of State, I'll take a tour around the world with every nation and reset, truly mean it, to reset the relationships, put an end to this emerging conflicts, and just live and let live. That is what I wanted to talk to you about. And usually, if I don't have anything to add to the conversation, I stay quiet. So, all right, let me check out to see some of your questions, if you have some, and we'll go from there. I'm going to go all the way back up to the top. See here. So, all right, let's see. Okay, integrity principle. So if you have your question, please just put Q, so I know it's a question, and I'd be happy to answer it for you guys. Don't know. And I know it takes a while for this to come up, because I think there's a delay with the YouTube by the time these things comes up. So let me see here. Oh, Boone, thank you very much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. Boone, by the way, guys, it's been since it started. Boone go way back. So thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. Lover of the Russian team, thank you very much for your support. It means a lot for your super sticker, that is. So it means a lot. So I appreciate it. Let me see if there is, again. Johnny, Johnny, you said a reminder was not notified. That's surprising. It's because I posted this. Anytime I do, guys, I set up the live stream, I set it up 2 days before, just for this reason. Sometimes there are delay from YouTube because this one goes through StreamYard. StreamYard is a different platform. I can do it on YouTube directly, but this is much better, because this setting here, platform, I'm able to share slides with you and so forth. So on YouTube, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, sorry to hear that, Johnny. So I'll make sure next time when I post something, I'll check it out to make sure. Brett Wilson, thank you very much for your super sticker. I appreciate it. Multipolar World, thank you so much for your super sticker. Multipolar World, guys, he's been with me for a long time. I remember it way back. So thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. It means a lot. So I appreciate it. Well, that's an interesting lover of the Russian. You said, I'm going to share the comments here, if I may. It says, I hope the next war is on U.S. soil. Well, it's unlikely, but actually, you raised an interesting point. And you know what's the interesting point is that there is a percentage here in the U.S., that goes above 50%. That says most likely a civil war will occur here in the U.S. So that will be even worse. A war, at least you are dealing with an enemy. Identify. Civil war is different. Civil war is different. So I won't be surprised. And this is what I'm doing with this, I hope some politicians is watching this so they can at least get some ideas and talk to their colleagues in the Senate or the House of Representatives. So, all right, question from ET. But And usually, if you put a question, I'm going to put it on the screen here so everybody can see. So question, David, but as far as Nord Stream 2 blow up is concerned, the argument becomes hearsay. And Hersh says the US and Norway both denied flatly what Hersh says. Good question. I'm glad you put this one. Just FYI for you to know, that's a tactic from the government. Our government always, if there are any issue, we always deny first. That's if you look at historically speaking with the Watergate, for example, it was complete denial. It was always denial first, but the truth comes out eventually with evidence. And as I said again, knowing what I know about Seymour Hersh, the guy with credibility. Again, the guy is not 20 years old or 30 that is seeking fame or wanted to. He cares less for that stuff, you know. So, and he's been around long enough to know. And his contacts, by the way, which those are his sources, they are inside, you know. Even if the government wants to hunt those resources, they won't be able to. He has more than one inside the government. So it's, yeah, that's what you're going to hear. Norway now, it's going to be, they're going to have a lot of explanation to do. You know, Norwegian people probably have no clue. It's no different than what's going on right now in Finland and Sweden are wondering. You know, like I said last time, Finland and Sweden lived in peace with the former Soviet Union and Russia for almost 50 years. Why all of a sudden? You know, and this is one example. And also because the role of the Stoltenberg, the NATO secretary, who's fomenting conflicts after conflicts. That's where part of the problem is. All right, let me see. Let me see. Yeah, Johnny, a civil war. Yes, that's based on the conversation that I had with people here inside. Of course, there are only few that I had a conversation with. That's not the. That's like when you do like in academia, when you do a survey or study for research for a PhD or whatever. If you do the research and you do the question qualitative that. The idea becomes you can have a sample of 5 people question and you base your data on that or the result. You have to have a large enough sample. That's the same argument. I had a conversation with few, but those few, they truly have a grasp of how the American system works. Of course, if I ask average Joe or average Jane, then I'm going to say, well, I don't know. And rightly so. They're not going to know. So that is where part of where the problem is. All right, question from Jack. Do you think the sanctions on Russia are like the Treaty of Versailles, West imposing rules, making Russia pay? It lead to World War II, and in a comparable way, will lead to World War III. Great question. And this is, again, guys, that's why it's important for us, all of us, to keep the conversation going, because that's how we learn from each other. And again, you see the scenarios of what happened in World War I and in World War II. Yeah, there's the possibility, except I personally, and again, my personal opinion, I don't see it going that direction. It's because at some point, and that point is coming soon. You all heard what happened 2 days ago when Russia launched one missile and shut down the electricity in Kiev. And now some Western countries are rethinking their statement about sending fighter jets to Ukraine, because they all know, you know, and for them to say, well, the Ukraine is going to beat Russia, it's nonsense. Let's just say it straightforward. So I don't see that scenario playing out to that degree. The reason being because Russia is not going to wait till that time happens. Russia has updated its nuclear doctrine, you know, and I wrote about it in my Russia book, in which I disclosed that Russia now, for the updates of the doctrine, that it says, and I'm paraphrasing here, if Russia feels, that's the key word, if Russia feels its security is threatened, it will preemptively use the nuclear weapons. And that's what I say. That's why the West understand the ramifications. Where the question is why. You look at Europeans that are bowing to what the US is saying, knowing that it's going into the wrong direction. That is where I'm like speechless as to just how much they lack of common sense. Not anymore. And to me, those are not leaders. These are just puppets. That's basically what it is. So that's the way I see it. Boom, let me see a question here. Did the Estonian president really offer the F-16 that Estonia doesn't have to Ukraine? No, it's just a hearsay. Estonia can even take care of itself. No, all what you hear is same statements coming out of what's his name, the Polish president. It's no sense, because even if you think about it, Germany does not want to have Poland, does not want Poland to become strong militarily. This is why when Poland said first, well, we're going to have to modernize our military, it didn't settle well with Germany. Yeah. You don't hear, and it's not reported in the idea of what's going on behind the scenes as far as how much fragmentation that is going on right now as we speak inside NATO. But you will never hear about it. It's no different than this sabotage that, when Seymour Hersh came up with it, all of a sudden media was running. So, yeah, that's no, I won't buy into that. And Estonia has no bones into all this. It's like the countries that have been used. Speaking of countries, I'm going to show you guys not a slide, but a picture of the countries that are involved in the Ukraine conflict here. So all right, boom, here you are. So here are the countries. There are two other countries are not listed on this one here. So those are involved. Japan is not one of them, by the way, because it was a conversation whether Japan no, it's not. Japan, I think, limited to very, very minor assistance. Same with South Korea. So they both did the same. So that is the difference with those two countries. So when you hear a country like Estonia saying what it's saying, it's nonsense. It's really nonsense. Richard, I want to say thank you to Richard for your super sticker. I really appreciate it. So it means a lot, Richard. Thank you again. So that is part of where the problem is with what's going on with Estonia. So good question from, I'm going to show it here, from Winter Sweet. Where does the Ukraine war end? I wish I have an answer. I really wish I have an answer. The one thing that I am certain of, based on my conversation with individuals who truly understand this in and out, is that the US, yes, it's my country, is sad to say, and I don't care if they are listening to me here, it's the truth. I ain't going to sugarcoat it. Doesn't want peace. The Israeli former prime minister, Naftali, has said that Ukraine and Russia wanted to sit down and resolve all this, and the US prevented it from happening. So where it ends, I truly do not know. I really do not know. It's hard to tell at this point, except that the West will not be able to sort of provide advanced weapons because Russia will escalate even further. I want to say thank you to, I'm going to share it here. Charito Munaz, thank you so much for your super sticker. And your statements, US and EU mainstream news have been suppressing Hersh's article about the Nord Stream sabotage. Do you think this story will later emerge when run for elections? Oh, no doubt about it, because our system is so fractured and fragmented that anything will turn it into political football. And here is the sad reality about all this. It's the Ukrainian people that are suffering. The president, comedian Zelensky, cares less. He's stashing money elsewhere. Even though I do believe his end is going to be tragic based on historical trends. So it's the Ukrainian people that's going to be suffering. And this is where part of where the problem is. So the idea of mainstream media, no. It's going to be the mainstream media is going to focus on this based on who they are supporting for re-election. And again, this is why American system is messed up, because everything depends on the next election. We don't think far enough. You don't have Secretary of State, for example, who can structure a foreign policy that will benefit the relationship of the United States with the rest of the world for the next 20 years. Because we have to think about the next elections. Everything is about next term. That's just sad how our system is, unfortunately. So, all right, let me see this one here. Richard and all right, let me see what time. Oh yeah, I'll do like 2 more questions, guys. And oh, of course, Winter Sweet, you are welcome. So let me see if any. Okay, JF question. David, in your opinion, do you think that the US, by losing its war against the Russian Federation, will cause a collapse of NATO and perhaps a breakup of the European Union? No, it won't go that far, because remember, anything with the system, an international system that is set, it takes time for it to dissolve. NATO is not going to disappear overnight or within a year. It's going to, because there's a lot of entanglement now. The problem that I foresaw a few years ago, when I was a kid, I used to really follow up on NATO. I still have. I found some notes that I used to take when I was a kid, and I would write down the countries. There were 9 at the time. Then it was 11 or 13 and moved up. The problem with NATO was the expansion. And the expansion happened with countries that have nothing to contribute to NATO. Like, for example, no offense to Montenegro, what does Montenegro has to offer NATO? And of course, will this only happen if European leaders, which there are none, will take stand and say, no, we can do our own security. But it's just a talk. Europe has been talking about having its own security. They can't do it because they are too weak. The US will throw money at them, bribe them, and that's it. So that's why I don't see the dissolvement of NATO. What you will see is that what will become of a mission for NATO, and NATO has no mission whatsoever. This is why conflicts like this will give life to NATO. This is why my big concern about the Secretary of NATO going to Asia, because that's where I see the next conflict. So Asian nations are going to be pushing, and they better be pushing against South Korea and Japan. Philippines, it is where my big concern. I have a big question mark on Philippines. And like I said last time, when Marcos Jr. won the election, I said back then, and it's on the record, that I will be very interested in seeing what kind of policy Marcos Jr. is going to pursue in managing his security needs with the US and his economic prosperity with China. And this is why I was like, okay, his trip to China, was he giving a lip service to China, knowing that he's already cut a deal with the Americans to expand the military bases? Making no mistake, if there is a military conflict in that part, Philippines will become a target. That I know for a fact. So, okay, let me see one more question here. Mao Smiley, are you planning on having Scott Ritter on your show? Yes, I do. I maybe on the other channel, but I do. Actually, Scott and we appeared in Washington D.C. for an interview together. We were called in over, and so I'm familiar with Scott, and I know about him for a long time. As a matter of fact, I used to do track and field in his alma mater, Franklin Marshall College. So, all right, let me see one more here. And yeah, that's about it, guys. I don't see any other questions here. One more here, and that will be the end for me here. So, Cheesecake, and by the way, Cheesecake, thank you very much for your comments. That's the reason why I read your comments, guys. It takes me time to sit down and answer all those. That's my way of saying how much I respect you. Yes, of course, I get those idiots, and I'll use the term straightforward. They better just go waste their time elsewhere. So a question from Cheesecake. Is the US even ready for a war with China? No, we're not. That's the truth that they are not going to disclose. And the reason why, there were about 18 scenarios that the Pentagon ran a few years ago. And they ran those scenarios to see, in case of war with the China, and we lost 17 of these scenarios. Because China has the advantage, geographical. It makes perfect sense. I am not a military strategist, but I understand the basics in the military. For us, we have to move our assets to Asia. China doesn't have to. It's right there, and we can't. That's why I did a video one time. Can the US fight two-front wars? No, we can't. And this is where the other big concern that I have with the escalation. It is very settled, but it is an escalation in Asia. That is of great concern to me. As I write the book about China, I'm digging deeper into that to understand the ramification of something like that. And a conflict in Asia, it's not going to be confined to Asia. It's going to go outside Asia. That's for sure. So the short answer is no, we can't. Winner Sweet, thank you so much for your super sticker. I truly appreciate it. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough for taking the time on this Saturday. Usually Saturday you go golfing and whatever. To me, it's also, I have other stuff I need to do, but this is important. That's why I was thinking in terms of maybe I'll keep this on a weekly basis, whatever. We have to have the conversation. We have to keep the conversation going. That's how we learn from each other. Please share the word about the channel because we want to grow it even bigger. And as I move along, as we make some few changes to all this. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed the last video I did about Egypt joining BRICS. Maybe one day we'll do one about BRICS. There's a lot of things coming up with BRICS if they play their cards right. So, and I have some videos on the deck for you guys that's going to be released in due time. So, as always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.